don't panic. You'll be able to rewatch it later. It will be on the KSAF YouTube channel. And on the flip side, if you say something absolutely brilliant, you can always grab the clip for your LinkedIn. It's basically free marketing for your genius ideas. Second, anonymity. I can't talk this evening. What's going on? If you share a scenario or story, please anonymize it. No names, no initials. No, you'll know who I mean. We're here to learn. We're not liable for general data protection. I'll always say protect your identities and don't put your reputation on the line. Third of all, the chat box is your friend. Please use it for questions, reflections, and thoughts as we go along. Some of the best insights often come from people who are typing furiously in the corner while the speaker is talking, which is myself. So don't hold back and share away. Fourthly is CPD certificates. Now, there's been a bit of an issue for some of you who have been with us before. There's been a bit of an issue with our certificate issuing company that we go with. So I'm on the case with that, but you will get a certificate hopefully within 48 hours of this one, and anyone who has missed their certificates from last time will hopefully have those soon as well. So you can stick them on your office wall, wave them triumphantly at your head teacher, or if you're like me, just add them to a mysterious pile of important documents that just sits in the corner of your desk until it all topples over. And lastly, cameras, totally your choice. If your camera's on, you're smiling, I'll assume you're absolutely loving every second of it. If your camera's off, I'll choose to believe you're listening intently and not secretly making tea or scrolling through TikTok. So that's the admin done. Let's shake off the formalities and get into the juicy bits. So let's talk about where we're heading in this session. I'd like to be really clear at the start, not with these boring learning objectives, but with real outcomes that will make your day-to-day work easier. Because if you're here, you already know that attendance work isn't always black and white. It's about balancing rules with real life. So by the end of this session, here's what I want you to walk away with. First, a proper understanding of the legal and statutory context around attendance enforcements. The bit that we can't change, the one that makes us sigh when the DfE drops a new edit or update at 4:59 on a Friday, but it's also understanding what is within our control, how we interpret, apply, and humanise that guidance. Second, we'll explore how enforcement can do two things. It can help by setting structure and expectations, but it can also harm when it's done without understanding a child's situation. We'll talk about that tension, the one between accountability and empathy, and how to tell when you're really crossing from one into the other. Third, we'll look at early help, not as a fluffy extra, but as a serious proactive intervention, because early help isn't about letting people off, it's about getting in there before the crisis really does hit. Fourth, we're going to introduce you to a brand new concept called the KSAF Balance Framework. It's something I designed to help schools and professionals make child-centred, defensible decisions, where you can show your reason and say, this was proportionate, this was fair, and this was a safeguarding in action decision. And finally, for number 5, I want you to reflect honestly on your current practice. Ask yourself, are we enforcing attendance because it's what's best for the child, or is it because what is expected by the system? And look, that's not a judgment, it's the reality of the job sometimes. We're constantly trying to meet statutory duties, keep parents engaged, and still sleep at night without dreaming about Broncom, Arbor, Sims, or the DfE templates. And that's exactly why you're here today, to find that balance between fining and also early intervention and making sure that we're not just enforcing for the sake of enforcement. So this isn't about saying enforcement is bad or support is good. It's about recognising that both exist to protect children and if we use them well. So everything we cover from here links back to that simple idea of how can we uphold the law without losing insight of the child behind it? And that's the question that will really shape the rest of the hour going forward. Okay, so let's build some of the foundation together before we start unpacking the emotional side of enforcement and safeguarding. Everything we do around attendance sits within the legal framework, and understanding that framework properly helps us make fair, defensible decisions later on. There are 3 key pieces of legislation that underpin school attendance in England. Number 1 is the Education Act of 1996. This is the big one. It's the backbone of all of the attendance law. Under section 444, paragraph 1, of the Act, parents are legally responsible for making sure their child attends school regularly. That phrase, attend regularly, is where all of our casework, letters, meetings, and sometimes even court proceedings come from. There are actually two levels of offence under Section 444. You have Section 444, paragraph 1, the basic offence. It applies if a child misses school without a good reason. The parent can receive a penalty notice, a fine, or be prosecuted. Then you have Section 441, paragraph A, paragraph 1, Section A, the aggravated offence. This is used when it's proven that a parent knowingly allowed their child to miss school. That one can lead to a court appearance and potentially even a custodial sentence. And I know it sounds harsh, but the idea behind it wasn't punishment. It was meant to make sure children aren't forgotten about. That's the accountability when a child is persistently absent. Then you have number 2, the Education Act Penalty Notices, England Regulation 2007. These regulations are what actually created the penalty notice system, the fines we all know and absolutely adore. They can say that local authorities can issue a fine when there's unauthorised absence, like term time holidays, truancy, and persistent lateness. But notice the word can and not must. This means issuing a fine is absolutely discretionary. The local authority, or even the school, depending on your local authority's policy, has the power to decide whether enforcement is proportionate and in the child's best interest. That's the first place we see the gap between the law and the human side. Just because we can issue a fine doesn't always mean that we should. And then you have number 3, the Department of Education's guidance, which is the main document, is called Working Together to Improve School Attendance 2024. This replaced the older 2022 guidance. It's not technically law, but it's still statutory guidance, which means schools must have regard to it. You cannot just ignore it. It sets out how schools, trusts, and local authorities should work in partnership to reduce their absences. The big message is that guidances are to be consistent in your approach with attendance, work proactively with families before escalation, use data to spot patterns early, and only enforce after all other reasonable support has been tried. And there's a really important line buried in that document that I always highlight. It says enforcement action should complement, not replace, early help and support. That line is basically the moral centre of the whole document, and it's the line that links perfectly in today's topic. Now, if you work in a school or a local authority, you'll also be guided by local policy. For example, your attendance policy and procedures, your local code of conduct for penalty notices, and sometimes a local written attendance strategy written by the local authority. Those documents explain who can issue fines, when, and how evidence should be collected. So when we talk about enforcement today, remember there's a ladder of responsibility. Schools identify and refer. Local authorities decide on the enforcement, and courts uphold it when challenged. And here's where it gets a bit tricky. Schools are also bound to keeping children safe in education, which makes attendance part of safeguarding. So we're constantly balancing two different duties, the legal duty to enforce and the moral duty to safeguard. And those two duties don't always hold hands nicely. You can have a child on an early help plan or a family in crisis who's also hitting persistent absence thresholds. Legally, you're supposed to escalate. Safeguarding wise, you might be thinking, if I escalate this, will I make things worse? That tension, that daily dilemma is exactly what this session's about. So remember this phrase, because it's going to come back again later. Compliance protects the system, safeguarding protects the child. Our job, your job, is to make sure those two things meet somewhere in the middle. Now we looked at the legal side, let's talk about where things really start to get a bit more complicated when enforcement meets the safeguarding. We have two duties that sit side by side. You have the legal duty to enforce attendance, and you also have the safeguarding duty to act in the child's best interest. Both are equally important, but they don't always align neatly. On paper, the process looks straightforward. Attendance drops, letter goes out, meeting happens, and once the threshold is met, a penalty notice can be requested. That's the system's duty. But in real life, we're dealing with families. We know the stories behind the data, and that's where it becomes more emotional. The spreadsheets say, fine, the child's situation says support. So let's break that down into a few real world examples. We have emotionally based school avoidance. A year 8 student, for example, attendance sitting at 62%. Mornings of panic attacks at the door, the attendance process has been followed to the letter. Letter sent, meeting held, home visits done. The next step says penalty notice. But would a fine here reduce anxiety or make it worse? This isn't non-compliance. As I've said in one of my previous courses about understanding EBSA, emotionally based school avoidance, it's actually distress. We also have case B of domestic abuse context. There's a year 5 student's attendance is at 60%, at 68%. Parent missing meetings, letters sent, you're on the final warning. But what if the lack of engagement isn't defiance, it's out of fear? What if escalating enforcement adds risk at home? Then you also have willful non-attendance. So year 10, 55%, parents laugh off every phone call. School's not for her. Supports have been offered and refused. And in this case, not enforcing could actually do harm because the message becomes school doesn't matter. Sometimes enforcement is what restores structure and accountability. So the question isn't whether we enforce or not, it's when, how, and why. Enforcement should protect, not punish, and safeguarding should understand and not excuse. Before every decision, I would ask 3 questions. 1, could enforcement plausibly increase risk for this child or family? 2, have we genuinely offered early help and not just advised it? And 3, would I be comfortable with justifying this decision both to a judge and the child? If I can answer yes to support offered, yes to proportionality, and no to increased risk, enforcement might be right next step. If not, I pause. Here's a simple truth. Attendance enforcement without safeguarding context is paperwork, not protection. You can tick every box on the attendance ladder and still miss the child entirely. And this is where professional judgment lives. This is the point where law meets life. We need to accept that both enforcement and safeguarding share the same goal: to keep a child safe, secure, connected to education. They just approach it from different sides. Enforcement protects through accountability, and safeguarding protects through understanding. Finding that balance between system and story is where our practice becomes ethical, because yes, we have to meet our statutory duties, but we also have to meet the child where they are as well. So that's the collision point, the point where we ask ourselves, how do we uphold the law without losing sight of that child? And that question leads us into our next section on ethical tension. So why this tension exists: schools are how to account for data and not stories. We don't look into, when the local authority and the DfE look into schools, they don't look at the backstory and the context behind each individual student. They only look at the data that's provided. And with the new working together to maintain attendance policies and guidance, that data gets sent directly to the DfE in a non-GDPR restrictive way, which means that the DfE and the local authority are only looking at what the numbers say and what not the safeguarding and the story says behind the child. We also have the local authority. They face public scrutiny for not enforcing fines and attendance. This has come up previous in different things as well. You look at the traveller community, they will go, well, you're fining us, but you're not fining these people. And then it becomes a whole thing with the local authority, then just issuing fines for everyone without any context. You also have attendance leads, often hold dual accountability. They will have legal compliance and also child welfare on top. So you have they need to make sure that every code on that student's attendance record is accurate. But at the same time, you have to do those welfare check-ins. And if that child is struggling with the idea of the concept of coming to school, they will struggle. So you've also got the human costs here of that. If a child's attendance drops below 80%, a parent receives a fine. They have all the letters, the meetings, the phone calls, the home visits, and then the parent receives the fine. And then the family disengage from school entirely, which then breaks the relationship that you've built so hard to work for, when all you could have done is looked into that data, looked at that safeguarding story, and actually taken into account that data and the concept of what's going on behind closed doors. So we need to reflect a little bit on why are we issuing, when are we issuing fines? Are we doing it for the child, or are we doing it to the child? Now, I have no idea if this is going to work at all, so we're going to hope it works for the sake of my sanity, because I've been trying to get this working all day, so we shall see.
There are many students in Camden who aren't making it to school. There is a rise in young people not attending school, but there are also a range of problems impacting young people who may have difficulties coming to school.
Some of those include financial issues at home, family problems, abuse, lack of support, low self-esteem, special educational needs, and much more. It's important that all pupils are supported well for us to attend school.
Attending school is super important for young people because it helps us to do well in our academic work and sets up for success in the future. At school, we learn lots of stuff like reading, writing, and maths, which helps us to do better in tests and exams.
Did you know that young people who attend school regularly are more likely to graduate and get good jobs? Plus, school isn't just about learning facts. It's also a place where social skills are developed and young people can make friends, play, and feel supported by teachers and classmates. Studies show that when we feel connected to our school, we are more likely to do well in our studies and have better mental health. So, going to school isn't just about getting good grades, it's about feeling happy and supported too.
If you are struggling, talk to someone you trust.
Apologies if there was an echo on that. I forgot to mute my microphone. Okay, so as you're watching that, I wanted you to think about this question, which I totally forgot to ask you. What does attendance mean? Why is my thing not working? Here we go. That's better. So what does attendance mean to the child in the film? Compare it to what it means to us as professionals. Now, it's a simple message, but it really does kind of hit home for us a little bit more, because we see it from there's grades, you've got grades, you have the data side of it that we have to keep up, and you also have the other side of it where we have the safeguarding responsibility too. But for them, as a young person, they're seeing it more in the terms of it's something much more personal. It's a difference between isolation and inclusion, between routine and chaos, and between being noticed and being missed. It's their kind of way of feeling in a community, because attendance isn't just an administrative duty, it's also a safeguarding function. So that way of seeing it is one of the earliest indicators that we can have that something with that child isn't right. So as we keep going today, I just want you to hold on to that message. Every absence has a story, every low percentage has a reason, and every attendance or conversation has the power to protect. Is it going to let me do it? Or is it just going to go back? We love it when technology works. It's amazing. Okay, brilliant. So now that we've reminded ourselves on why attendance matters, why it's more than just a target or a number, we can start looking at what we can bring with that same understanding into decisions that we have to make every day. Because if there's one truth about this in this job, is that no two attendance cases are exactly the same. Every child comes with their own context, their own challenges, and their own story. And while the law gives us the rules, it doesn't just give us the guidance for those grey areas. The moment where you're sitting at your desk thinking, if I do this, I might cause harm. But if I don't, I might miss the harm. And that's where this next part comes in. The balance framework was created to help us make confident, consistent, child-centered decisions in exactly those situations. It's not about replacing your judgment. It's about supporting it. It's a reflective model that helps you stop, think, and check. Am I protecting the law, or am I protecting the child, or can I do both? It's built around 7 simple stages, each one representing a key question you should ask yourself before escalating or enforcing. And what I love about this is it is not rigid, it's adaptable. So whether you're an attendance officer, a DSL, a head of year, part of the year team, or a education welfare officer, this model gives you a shared language for balancing compassion and also compliance. Each step moves you from information to understanding, and from understanding to action. It keeps the focus on safeguarding, but it also respects the statutory side, because both are needed. So from this point on, we're going to talk through the balance framework stage by stage. We'll look at real examples, case studies, and questions you can use with your teams and in your own decision making. And by the end of it, you'll have something practical, something that you can take back to school when we go back after half term. And you use next time you're facing one of those tricky attendance calls that sits right between support and enforcement. So we'll start with section B. Section B is about background, understanding the full picture. So this stage is all about pausing before acting, taking time to understand why a child's attendance has fallen before we decide to respond and how to respond. When we talk about background, we're talking about building the full story around the child, the home circumstances, the social and emotional factors, the changes that might have led to a dip in attendance. It's about seeing beyond the percentage on the screen and asking the bigger question of, what is this child's world looking like right now? Because attendance doesn't fall without a reason. There's always something underneath it, sometimes visible and sometimes hidden. At this stage, professionals should focus on gathering, connecting information from multiple sources, not just relying on the attendance certificate. That might include notes or observations from class teachers and support staff, conversations with parents and carers, previous early help and safeguarding involvement, health or SEN needs, and any significant family changes like housing, employment, or bereavement. So having a look at Child A. Child A has 68% attendance. Initially, this was viewed as persistent non-compliance, a family refusing to engage. However, when background information was gathered, it was revealed that mum had a terminal illness and the child had taken on caring responsibilities at home and had become emotionally withdrawn. Once early help was initiated, support was put in place, practical, emotional, and educational. Within the academic year, their attendance rose from 68 to 89%. This case reminds us why the background stage is so crucial. If we had acted on the data alone, the response would have been enforcement. But by understanding the background, the approach becomes support. This stage isn't about sympathy, it's about having an informed practice. Understanding background helps professionals make proportionate ethical decisions that still uphold legal duties, but to do so in a way that safeguards the child's well-being. When this stage is done well, every professional should be able to summarise the situation in one clear contextual sentence. For example, attendance is reduced due to parental illness and caring responsibilities. Early help in place to stabilise attendance. If we can't yet summarise the context clearly, it means we don't have enough background information to make a fair decision. So before moving forward with any action, we ask 3 grounding questions. Do we understand the why behind the attendance pattern? Do we have enough information to explain it clearly? And can enforcement increase risk if used too early? This stage protects the child and the professional. It ensures decisions are not just legally defensible, but ethically justified. Because when we understand the story behind the attendance, we can tailor the intervention. And that's how we move from policy to practice that actually makes a difference. So having the established background, the next step is to turn that information into insight, where we start to break down patterns, triggers, and meaning. That's where we move into A, which is analysis. So we need to look at the identifying the root cause. If the background stage is about collecting the story, an analysis is about understanding what the story is trying to tell us. At this stage, we're not gathering data, we're interpreting what we've got now. This is where we look at the information we've gathered and start asking, why is this actually happening? Because data alone won't solve the problem, it's what we do with it that matters. Analysis means looking for patterns and connections. We take what we know from the background and ask, when the absences are happening, what's happening around those times? Is there a link between certain days, members of staff, lessons? Have there been any recent changes in school or home circumstances? Are we seeing patterns that point to anxiety, peer conflict, or curriculum issues? This stage is where we move from reaction to reflection. We stop seeing attendance as a random and start seeing it as a relational, something that connects to how a child feels, what they're experiencing, and who they trust. We have case snapshot with child B. Child B attendance increased shortly after moving tutor groups. When the data was analysed, it showed that absence clustered around days when lessons were shared with a particular group of peers. Further conversations revealed that child's being bullied in a new class. Once this was identified, the school shifted focus away from enforcement and towards emotional support and peer mediation. No legal intervention was required, and attendance recovered to 94%. This captures the whole purpose of the analysis stage. If we focused entirely on the register, it might have looked like simple defiance or lack of effort. But by analysing the pattern and the context, we discover a safeguarding issue or a pastoral issue, and the response becomes protective rather than punitive. When professionals analyse attendance effectively, they're not looking for fault, they're looking for meaning. The aim is to find the root cause and not the quickest label that we can put on it. Because once we understand the why, we can then design the right how. And analysis helps ensure that any next step, whether support or enforcement, are proportional and defensible and also child-centred. It's where we document our reasoning. If we challenge later, we can clearly show, well, here's the data, here's what it told us, and here's how we responded. This stage transformed attendance work from reactive case handling to evidence-based practice. So to summarise, background gives us the information, analysis gives us the understanding. And once we understand the root cause, we're ready for the next stage, which is L, for legal duty, where we align what we know with what the law expects us to do. So we have L, legal duty and upholding the law with humanity. This stage is while compassion must guide our work, it must also operate within the boundaries of the law. It's where we hold two truths at once: that education is a legal requirement and that enforcement must still be delivered with empathy and integrity. At this point in the framework, we've gathered the background, we've analysed the root cause, and now we must align our understanding with the legal responsibilities we carry as professionals. So under section 444 of the Education Act of 1996, parents have a legal duty to ensure their child attends school regularly. So schools, local authorities and trusts must have statutory duties to promote attendance and act where persistent absence is identified. This isn't optional, this is legal safeguard designed to protect the child's right to education. But here's the nuance. Legal duty doesn't mean automatic enforcement. The law gives us the power to enforce, but not the obligation to punish. Our role is to decide whether enforcement is both proportionate and in the child's best interest. And this is where professional judgment is absolutely critical. We must apply the law with both precision and also compassion, ensuring our decisions are consistent, fair and defensible. The working together to improve school attendance guidance tells us that enforcement should be used only where support has been offered and refused, or where engagement has not improved attendance. That means enforcement is the end of the journey and not the starting point. So at this stage, we ask three more key questions. Has sufficient support been offered and documented? Does this case meet the threshold for escalation as defined by local authority policies? And could enforcement in this context cause or increase harm? If the answer to the first two is yes and the third is no, then enforcement may be the right next step. If no, we pause and explore other routes first. Upholding the law with humanity means recognising that every letter, meeting and fine we issue has a human impact. We can enforce boundaries without losing kindness. We can act decisively without losing passion, and we can hold parents accountable while still treating them with dignity. This stage isn't just about knowing the law, it's about understanding its purpose. The Education Act doesn't exist to criminalise families, it exists to safeguard the children's access to education. So when we enforce attendance fairly and proportionately, we're not just punishing, we're protecting. So L for legal duty is our checkpoint. It's where we stop and make sure our decisions are legally compliant, backed by statute and policy. We have to make sure that they're ethical, reflective, fair and transparent, and child-centred, ensuring that the outcome benefits the learner and not just the system. Because if our practice is lawful but not humane, it fails safeguarding. And if it's compassionate but ignores legal duty, it fails our accountability as well as the parents' accountability. So the balance is both, upholding the law with humanity. Once we're confident that the decision meets both tests, legal and ethical, we can move to the next stage, which is for A. Alternatives. Give me one moment. Oh dear. Don't come down with a cold during half term. So the fourth stage of balance framework is A, alternatives, early help and interventions, or exploring support before any sanctions are put in place. This is the point where we actively explore what can be done instead of or before enforcement. It's about asking what support could make this better rather than what consequence should come next. By the time we reach this stage, we've already established the background and analysed the root cause, and we understand what's driving the attendance concern. Now, the question becomes, how do we help the child re-engage sustainably and also safely? So A for alternatives is all about action routes in partnership. It's where support plans, early help pathways and community networks start to work together. The goal here isn't to avoid accountability, it's to create the condition where the accountability becomes achievable. So you have child C, attendance has fallen to 72%. Rather than issue a fine, the school convened an early help meeting with attendance officer and the SENCO present. Together, they created a tailored plan focusing on sleep routines, morning transitions, and anxiety triggers that made school attendance difficult. The plan had included a gradual reintegration plan, parents' check-ins, and consistent daily contact from a trusted adult in the school. Within 6 weeks, attendance rose to 87%. This example shows how powerful proactive intervention can be when it's done with the intention and joined up support. No legal escalation was required, and instead, the solution came from connection, not coercion. The alternative stage asks 3 more essential questions. What can we put in place now to remove barriers? Who needs to be involved to make that happen? And how will we measure progress so we can evidence impact? This is where we lean on partnership working between families, schools and external services. It's also where early help becomes the bridge between safeguarding and attendance, because early help isn't a kind of like soft option. It's structured, recorded and accountable support. It allows us to demonstrate that we've met our duty to offer help before considering any enforcement. Alternatives also may include early help assessments or team around the family meetings, support for routines, transport or morning readiness, emotional regulation work for anxiety-related absence, mentor support or trusted adult check-ins, family outreach or parent sessions, and also coordinated plans between SEN, attendance and pastoral teams. The message here is simple: before we escalate, we collaborate. When professionals work together around the child, enforcement now becomes that last resort and not a default. And even if attendance doesn't immediately return to 100%, we can build trust, we reduce risk and strengthen engagement, which are safeguarding successes in themselves. So it's all about exploring every available pathway before we go on to penalties. It's about replacing blame before belonging and pressure with partnership. because the most effective enforcement is the one you never have to use. Once we've explored every reasonable alternative and you can evidence that that support has been offered, reviewed, and also exhausted, we move on to the next step, which is N for nexus, where enforcement and safeguarding intersect. So we've got to the point now in the framework where the two worlds have been explored, the world of attendance enforcement and the world of safeguarding are met head on. Pardon me. It's the moment we stop and decide what's next. So we need to, the word nexus actually does mean connection or meeting point, and that is exactly what this stage is about. It's where professional judgment, evidence, and ethics come together to guide our next step. By the time we reach the nexus stage, we've done the groundwork, we've understood the background, we've analysed the root cause, we know our legal duty, and we've explored every available alternative. Now, the question is simple but heavy. Do we enforce or do we defer? Child D case snapshot is that the parents refused to engage with the school and missed repeated attendance panels. The local authority recommended a penalty notice. However, during case review, the DSL raised safeguarding concerns, and the parent was a domestic abuse survivor, currently living in a refuge. After a multi-agency discussion, the decision was made to defer the fine and instead initiate coordinated support through early help and domestic abuse services. Within a month, the family re-engaged with school, attendance improved, and the safeguarding risk reduced. This is the very essence of the nexus stage. This isn't about leniency, it's about alignment. It's where we weigh up both sides of our duty, to uphold the law and also to protect the child. At this intersection, that's rarely a perfect answer. Instead, there's a considered one. We examine what enforcement would achieve, what it could risk, and whether there's still space for support to work. To reach a balanced decision at the nexus stage, we ask 4 key questions. When you think about the impact, so what effect will enforcement have on the child and the family? We need to think about, could it escalate harm and or disengagement? So we need to look at the risk. You also have the evidence. Have we genuinely exhausted every supportive route? And accountability. Can this decision be explained, defended, and justified if reviewed externally? If we can answer those questions confidently, we've reached a proportionate decision. If we can't, it's a sign we need to pause, consult, and gather more information. The nexus stage also reinforces the importance of shared decision making. No one should carry this alone. Attendance leads, DSLs, and local authority officers should always discuss high risk or complex cases together. When we decide collectively, we ensure that enforcement is discussed highly between attendance leads, DSLs, and local authority officers. We need to make sure that enforcement and safeguarding stay aligned and are not in competition with each other. Child's D case shows that sometimes the most powerful decision we can make is to wait with purpose. By deferring the fine, the school didn't avoid responsibility, it fulfilled it differently. The outcome still improved attendance, but it also protected the vulnerable parent and reduced the risk. That's what it means for enforcement and safeguarding to truly intersect. So N, being nexus, is the pause moment that keeps the system humane. It's where we protect children by thinking, not just by acting. Once that balanced decision has been made and recorded, we move on to C, for collaboration. We need to make sure that we have shared decisions and shared responsibility. This is a stage that reminds us that attendance isn't owned by one person, one role, or one department. It's shared. It's the recognition that complex attendance issues rarely have a single cause and therefore can't have a single solution or a single team working on it. By the time we reach this point in the framework, we've already gathered the background, analysed the cause, considered the legal duty, explored every possible alternative support, and reached our decision point. Now it's time to make sure whatever decision we've made, whether that's supportive, to support, escalate, or to monitor, becomes a collective action, not an individual burden. So C for collaboration is where partnership becomes protection. It ensures the system around the child moves as one, safeguarding SEN, attendance, mental health, local authority, and family support, all working towards the same outcome. So child E's attendance dropped to 61%, triggering potential legal action. Before escalating, the DSL requested a multi-agency review. Through the process, the SENCO identified signs of an undiagnosed processing disorder, and the Educational Welfare Officer arranged a referral for a neuro assessment. With support in place, the family started to re-engage, and no fine was issued. By the end of term, attendance had rose. This is the power of collaboration in action. No single professional could have solved that case alone, but by sharing responsibility, the right expertise surfaced at the right time. Collaboration stage asks us to think in networks, not in hierarchies. So who else might hold insight, influence, or relationship with this family that might be missing from working together? Are we working together with SEN, with early help, with safeguarding, or are we all still working in silos? When collaboration happens effectively, three things occur. Decisions become safer. They're made more collectively with multiple perspectives. Accountability becomes shared. No one professional carries the weight of making that whole decision. And you also have the solution becoming sustainable because every partner contributes to the same plan. So this stage is all where we connect and communicate. Regular multi-agency reviews, constant updates, and shared case notes prevent duplication and also drift. A simple conversation between professionals can often save weeks of uncertainty or prevent an unnecessary escalation further. Collaboration doesn't just mean more people in the room, it means better coordination in what we do next. When we collaborate, we turn attendance work into teamwork, and that's where real progress happens. So child E's story captures that beautifully. Instead of rushing to enforcement, the team paused and shared information and uncovered an unmet need. By addressing the cause together, they improved attendance and reduced risk, a win for both safeguarding and statutory compliance. So it's about collective intelligence. It's a safety net that ensures every child has more than one professional in their corner. It's where the word "we decided" replaces "I decided." And once we collaborate truly in one place, we move into the final stage of balance framework, E for evaluation, where we reflect on the impact for our actions, review outcomes, and also ensure that learning from each case shapes one from the last one. So this stage, as I said, is just about reflection, turning action into understanding, experience into progress. Because every attendance case, whether successful or challenging, has something to teach us. So evaluate asks one simple question: what have we learned and how will it change what we do next? By this point in the framework, we've done the full journey. We've understood the background and analysed the cause, upheld the law, explored alternatives, and reached the decision point and worked collaboratively together. Now we step back and assess the impact of it all. Evaluation isn't about the blame or box ticking. It's about insight, looking honestly at what worked, what didn't work, and why. It allows us to recognise effective strategies, refine what's less effective, and embed that learning into our deeper, wider practice and policy. So we have an evaluation practice case snapshot. After 2 penalty notices were issued within a single term, the school conducted a reflective review. They found that both families involved were struggling with food poverty and parental burnout, factors that hadn't been identified early enough. As a result, the school introduced an attendance and wellbeing clinic as an early intervention model combining pastoral support with practical help. In the following term, no fines were issued, attendance improved because early help was addressed and early needs had been addressed before escalation became necessary. And that's what this stage is all about, is using evaluation not to criticise, but to evolve our practice. This should happen at 3 different levels. You should have an individual case review. After each case closes, we need to ask ourselves what worked for this child and family. What was enforcement proportionate if we provided any enforcement? Did our interventions align with any safeguarding principles? And what could we do differently next time? And then need to have a look at the team reflection within attendance or pastoral teams, holding short debriefs. Are there recurring themes? Are certain barriers appearing again and again, like mental health, anxiety, or poverty? what gaps exist in our current processes. And also at leadership level, a strategic learning development needs to be considered. How can our policies adapt to reflect what we've learned? Do our escalation routes support or undermine safeguarding practice? And can we strengthen early identification to prevent repeat cases? The evaluate stage is what turns the balance framework from a one-time tool into a living culture. It keeps practice dynamic, responsive, and rooted in continuous improvement. Child E showed us that collaboration can transform outcomes. This case shows how reflection transforms systems. When we stop and evaluate, we close the loop. We stop seeing attendance work as isolated and incidents, and start viewing it as part of our evolving learning organisation, one that grows together with every decision made. So E, evaluate, is where accountability meets growth. It's how we ensure that every action leaves behind not just impact, but insight. When schools embed evaluation into their culture, attendance practice becomes smarter, fairer, and more preventative. And that's when enforcement and safeguarding finally move into harmony and not just reflective ones. So we need to make sure that we're putting the balance framework into action. So now that we've explored each stage of the balance in depth, it's time to move into the practice. This section is where we bring together and apply the framework into real world case scenarios. So you'll see on the screen the case study titled Reluctant Returner. Child F is 13 years old. Their attendance has dropped to 58% over the last term. The parent has said the child hates school and cannot cope. EBSA is suspected, but there's no formal diagnosis. Early help was previously offered, but the parent has disengaged. Now, the local authority has requested evidence to support a potential penalty notice. This is one of those cases that sits in the middle of the tension we've been talking about, where attendance enforcement and safeguarding all intersect together. So here's your task. I want you to apply the KSAF balance framework to this solution. So in the chat, we're going to walk through it step by step, using the prompts on the screen. Think about the professional conversation. There's no perfect answers here. It's just reflective ones. So we'll start from the top of the framework and move down. What's the background? What do we already know about child F, their family and emotional state, or any previous involvement? What information do you want to gather making the decision? What analysis can we make? Looking at the attendance data and what we know, what patterns or triggers might exist, for example. Obviously, you haven't got that full in place, but you've got a small insight. So what type of attendance data would we be looking at, and what type of triggers or patterns are we potentially looking at as well? Is there a difference between what's being said and what's being shown in the data? Would there be in this situation? What legal duty applies here? 58% attendance, this technically meets the threshold for legal intervention, but have we fulfilled our responsibility to support before that point? What alternatives exist before enforcement? Could we re-engage early help, bring in mental health support, or work with the SENCO to explore assessment for EBSA or SEND needs? What is the nexus? This is the decision point. If the local authority is asking for evidence of enforcement, how do we balance that with what we know about potential emotional distress and safeguarding? And how do we collaborate? Who needs to be at that table? Does there need to be a DSL? Does there need to be the SENCO? Does there need to be more attendance officers? Does there need to be the local authority inclusion lead? Or maybe even GP, CAMS, social services? Who else needs to be around that child to make sure that they succeed? If we take that supportive approach, what would success look like in this case? Would it be 100% attendance? Obviously, that's not going to happen, but could it be an improved attendance? Or would it be consistent with a partial attendance with improved engagement? So have a think now, look at what the case study says and see if you can apply that balance there as well. I'll give you a couple of minutes to get those in the chat and then we'll come back and have a look at those. I'll give you a few more moments on that one, just to put that out there. Please do make sure you attempt some of the questions. This does form part of the requirement for your CPD certificate going forward. So just pop some of the answers in the chat, even if it's just 1 or 2 answers, just as many as you can. I'll give you a few more moments and then we'll move on. Okie dokie. So let's have a little look around what we've got so far. So we have maybe an SEN need yet, so that could potentially be part of it, of why that child has dropped. So definitely getting in the Senko to maybe do a referral or more of an in-depth assessment. Review the attendance pattern over time to spot trends. Yeah, so we need to look at trends. Are they avoiding certain lessons, certain times of day? Are they avoiding recreational time? Because sometimes it could be peer conflict as well that we need to look into. We also need to begin EBSA support if appropriate. Yeah, so making sure that we understand what emotional based school avoidance is. So maybe asking for key context. We have a load of resources regarding emotionally based school avoidance on our website, so do have a look at that. Key staff, yeah, and look at which lessons are being missed. I'll start with supportive contact with the family, possibly off-site, and put a gradual reintegration plan in place through. Yeah, so a lot of the time when schools are asking for meetings, this is the big one. When schools are asking for meetings, they're always going, well, let's meet in school. And sometimes for that child, because the child needs to be there for that meeting, because it's part of our approach, is that every child should have their voice said in the meeting. They are the ones who are not coming into school. It's not the parents, although the parents have the legal duty to make sure they get into school. It's also that we need to make sure that we're there to get their voice and their opinions involved as well. So maybe definitely looking at having a possible off-site venue. A lot of schools now are working with their community centres, their local community centres, to make sure that there's a meeting room that they can book out to be able to have those meetings off-site and put a gradual integration plan. Yeah, so another thing is that in the emotionally based school avoidance course that we offer, which we've got coming up, I think we've got another one coming up soon, which will go over what EBSA is. A gradual reintegration plan works, but there are some fallouts that could potentially happen with that if things don't go to plan. So making sure that everyone in your school knows about that reintegration plan, or those who need to know, for example, the teachers, reception, attendance officers, pastoral support teams, making sure that they understand. So yeah, that's great. Discussing a child might open up an opportunity for them to engage in school activities. Exactly, yeah. So looking at what their interests are as well, maybe having a focus on their reintegration plans, having at least 2 core subjects and a lesson that they enjoy. Look at the potential family history. Yeah, so is there any chance that they've got siblings that go to school that are experiencing the same thing, or have experienced the same thing in the past and are now on the right course, and now that their siblings are following suit? So maybe having a look at what worked well with their siblings and trying to change it up so it meets that child as well, but also you've already got that initial background. Yeah, so collaboration, looking at family history over the years, start ABSA questionnaire and support work. So yeah, some great look at the different parts of the balance framework. There is making sure that we are putting in as much support as we can, and only when that support fails do we go to the last step. Fantastic. Okay, so there's moving on to the key takeaways. So as we come to the end of today's session, I want to leave you with 5 KSAF principles for balance enforcement, because these are what make the balance framework live and breathe in practice. These aren't just nice ideas, they're what turn compliance into care and enforcement into safeguarding. So number 1 is enforcement is a safeguarding action, not a punishment. Attendance laws exist to protect children's rights to education. It's not to penalise parents. Every fine, every meeting, and every letter, when done ethically, is about the act of protection. It's about making sure that no child is left unseen or unsupported. Number 2 is context is your best defence. Every action you take must be rooted in understanding. If you can explain the reason behind your decision and show that it was based on a clear picture of the children's background and needs, then your practice is defensible, your ethics are visible, and your integrity is intact. Early help isn't a soft option, it's a strong prevention. When we act early, we don't just save a child from falling through the cracks, we save families, time, and system strain. So early help isn't about avoiding enforcement, it's about making enforcement unnecessary. We also have number 4, collaboration protects practitioners. When decisions are shared, accountability becomes a collective and not just a personal or on one person. No one should ever have to make a difficult attendance decision alone. So bringing in DSL, the SENCO, the EWO, or the local authority officer doesn't just support that child, it protects you as a professional. And 5, reflection makes practice sustainable. Every case you handle, whether it ends up with a fine, a family plan, or a conversation, teaches you something. Use those lessons. What you learn from one child's story shapes how you respond to the next. Evolution isn't a bureaucratic step, it's your ethical safeguard. And finally, this quote sums up everything we've explored today, and that's balance isn't about choosing side, it's about protecting both the law and the child. It's not about being the soft professional or the strict one, it's about being the thoughtful one, the one who upholds the law, protects the child, and makes every decision with clarity, care, and courage. So as you leave this session today, take the balance framework with you, not just as a model, but as a mindset. Because when you work in balance, you don't just enforce attendance, you safeguard futures. And a poster for the balance framework will be available on the KSAF website in due course. It's just something that needs to be uploaded by the admin people. I don't do my website, so yeah, if you want the resource, have a look in a few days. The KSAF balance framework will be up on the resources page. And talking about the website and talking about things that we offer, I just want to say a few words about KSAF. So KSAF exists because we know that none of us can actually tackle issues like EBSA and balancing fines and linking attendance and safeguarding alone. It takes collaboration, shared practice, and a collective voice. And it's exactly what this forum was created to provide. Through KSAF, we run quite a few CPD events, just like this one, spaces where professionals from around the UK can come together, learn and share strategies. But it is not just about training, it's about resource sharing, making sure that practical tools, templates and approaches are available to everyone, not just locked away in individual schools. It's also about professional networking. We know that the best solution often comes from conversations, talking to someone who's had has faced a similar situation or familiar situation, or hearing how another setting has successfully navigated the same issues. KSAF does provide a space for those connections to happen. Together, we can influence county and nationwide practice. By pooling our expertise and experiences and our data, we have a stronger voice to shape policies and support around the UK. We ensure that the voices of practitioners are part of those bigger conversations. And also importantly, we have free membership for everyone in Kent and in the UK. I have to specify that because I haven't edited the slide to show that it says in the UK as well. This isn't about cost or barriers, it's about creating a community where knowledge is shared openly. And when we support each other in that way, in the work that we do and we all care about deeply, we have 45 members as of opening in September this year. So do join us. It's free. Just go to our website at ksaf.uk and join up. Just literally all you got to do is put a few details in and we will send you your certificate and your login details for the area. So as you leave today, I want to thank you for engaging with this session. You've reflected, you've shared, and you've committed to action. It's a complex challenge working with attendance and safeguarding, but with frameworks like Balance, with compassion within our practice, and with communities like KSAF supporting each other, we can make a real difference to the lives of children and families across the UK. So I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. I do apologise for ruining your amazing half terms with my awful voice, but I hope this has given you some input and knowledge on how to tackle balancing enforcement for next term. I really appreciate you taking time out of your half term to do this. I know you've probably all got overflowing inboxes, kids to support, and at least 3 cups of cold coffee waiting for you. So let's connect, let's protect children, and let's do better together. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, you can reach me on email at info@ksaf.uk or visit www.ksaf.uk. We've got loads and loads of resources on the website as well. And if you found today useful, please leave us a quick review on Facebook or via email. Think of it like an Ofsted, but nicer and quicker, and you don't have to write a 40-page self-evaluation. But thanks again, and I really hope to see you at our next event on the 29th, I believe it is. I'll have to check the calendar, but you will get an email regarding our next one. So see you later and have a good rest of your half term.